In the annals of tech history, few stories are as gripping as the legal battle between Mark Zuckerberg and the Winklevoss twins, Cameron and Tyler, over the origins of Facebook. What began as a collaboration at Harvard University in 2003 spiraled into a high-stakes lawsuit that accused Zuckerberg of stealing the idea for what would become the world's most influential social media platform. The saga, immortalized in the 2010 film The Social Network, is a tale of ambition, betrayal, and the birth of a digital empire. This dramatic mini-documentary explores the origins of the dispute, the intense legal proceedings, the $65 million settlement, and how this early betrayal shaped Zuckerberg's reputation, personal life, and approach to business partnerships. Drawing on legal documents, contemporary accounts, ex-posts from 2025 revisiting the controversy, and Zuckerberg's own reflections on the social network's inaccuracies, will separate fact from fiction and examine the lasting impact of this pivotal moment in tech history. Act 1, The Harvard Connection. The setting, Harvard, 2003. In the early 2000s, Harvard University was a crucible of innovation, where bright young minds competed to leave their mark. Among them were Cameron and Tyler Winklevoss, identical twins and Olympic-level rowers known for their athletic prowess and privileged upbringing. Alongside their classmate Divya Narendra, they conceived Harvard Connection, later renamed ConnectU, a social networking platform designed to connect Harvard students through a digital directory. The idea was simple but revolutionary for its time, a website requiring a harvard.edu email address to ensure exclusivity, fostering connections among students for socializing, dating, and networking. The Winklevoss twins and Narendra needed a skilled programmer to bring their vision to life. Enter Mark Zuckerberg, a sophomore known for his coding brilliance and for creating FaceMash, a controversial website that ranked students' attractiveness. In late 2003, the trio approached Zuckerberg to work on Harvard Connection. According to the Winklevosses, they had a verbal agreement: Zuckerberg would code the platform in exchange for equity in the venture. Emails from the time show Zuckerberg engaging with the team, discussing technical details, and promising progress. However, as weeks passed, the twins grew frustrated with Zuckerberg's delays and vague responses. Behind the scenes, Zuckerberg was working on his own project, the Facebook. Launched on February 4, 2004, from his dorm room, the Facebook bore striking similarities to Harvard Connection. It required a harvard.edu email for access, focused on connecting students, and featured a clean, user-friendly interface. The Winklevosses and Narendra were stunned. They alleged that Zuckerberg had deliberately stalled their project while using their ideas to build his own platform. Emails later revealed in court showed Zuckerberg telling a friend he was stringing along the Harvard Connection team, suggesting he never intended to deliver on their project. This perceived betrayal set the stage for a legal showdown. The Winklevosses and Narendra felt cheated, believing their idea had been hijacked by a coder they trusted. For Zuckerberg, the Facebook was the realization of his own vision, built from scratch with no direct reliance on Harvard Connection's code. The truth, as later court documents would reveal, was murkier, a mix of overlapping ideas, competitive ambition, and a lack of formal agreements. Act 2, The Lawsuit. Filing the case. In September 2004, the Winklevoss twins and Divya Narendra, through their company ConnectU, filed a lawsuit against Zuckerberg and Facebook in Massachusetts federal court. The complaint alleged that Zuckerberg breached an oral contract, misappropriated their idea, and used proprietary source code intended for Harvard Connection. They claimed Zuckerberg's actions constituted fraud, unfair competition, and theft of trade secrets. Facebook countersued, accusing ConnectU of unfair practices related to a side project called Social Butterfly, which involved another Harvard student, Wayne Chang. The lawsuit gained traction as the Facebook exploded in popularity, expanding beyond Harvard to other universities and eventually the public. By 2007, Facebook was a cultural phenomenon, valued at billions, making the stakes of the legal battle enormous. The Winklevosses argued that Zuckerberg's deception cost them the opportunity to build what became Facebook, while Zuckerberg maintained that Harvard Connection was a rudimentary concept that he transformed into something far greater. Central to the case were Zuckerberg's emails, uncovered during discovery. One infamous email, sent to a friend in 2004, showed Zuckerberg boasting about delaying Harvard connection to focus on his own site. Another email referenced a couple of upperclassmen, presumably the Winklevosses, whose project he needed to outpace. These messages painted a picture of a cunning, ambitious young programmer willing to bend ethical boundaries to win. However, Zuckerberg's defenders argued that ideas are not property, and the emails reflected a competitive mindset rather than outright theft. The Harvard connection code itself was never used in the Facebook, weakening claims of direct misappropriation. The legal proceedings were grueling, involving depositions, forensic analysis of Zuckerberg's computer, and intense negotiations. The Winklevosses hired top-tier lawyers, including their father, a Wharton-educated financial expert, to bolster their case. Zuckerberg, backed by Facebook's growing resources, assembled a formidable legal team. Both sides knew a public trial could be damaging. For the Winklevosses, it risked exposing their inability to execute their idea. For Zuckerberg, it threatened to tarnish his reputation as Facebook's sole visionary. In February 2008, after years of legal wrangling, the parties reached a settlement. The agreement gave the Winklevosses and Narendra $20 million in cash and $45 million in Facebook stock, valued at the time at $65 million. The deal also required ConnectU to shut down. The settlement was seen as a victory for both sides. The Winklevosses received significant compensation, and Zuckerberg avoided a public trial that could have revealed more damaging emails or further scrutinized his ethics. However, the settlement wasn't the end. In 2010, the Winklevosses sought to reopen the case, arguing that Facebook had misrepresented the value of its stock during negotiations. They claimed the shares were worth far less than the $45 million stated, citing an internal valuation of $8.88 per share instead of the $35.90 used in the deal. If true, the settlement was worth only $31 million, not $65 million. The courts, however, were unsympathetic. In April 2011, the Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals upheld the settlement, with Chief Judge Alex Kaczynski writing, "The Winklevosses are not the first parties bested by a competitor who then seek to gain through litigation what they were unable to achieve in the marketplace." The twins briefly considered appealing to the U.S. Supreme Court but ultimately dropped the case in June 2011, accepting the original $65 million deal, which, due to Facebook's rising valuation, was worth over $200 million by then. The 2010 release of The Social Network, directed by David Fincher and written by Aaron Sorkin, brought the Winklevoss-Zuckerberg saga to a global audience. Based on Ben Mesrich's book The Accidental Billionaires, the film dramatized the founding of Facebook, portraying Zuckerberg as a brilliant but socially awkward antihero who outmaneuvered his privileged rivals. The Winklevoss twins, played by Armie Hammer, were depicted as polished, entitled jocks, members of Harvard's elite Porcellian Club who embodied the establishment Zuckerberg rebelled against. The film was a critical and commercial success, earning 8 Oscar nominations and grossing over $220 million worldwide. However, it shaped public perception in ways that both sides contested. The Winklevosses were cast as sympathetic but out-of-touch plaintiffs, while Zuckerberg was shown as a morally ambiguous genius. The movie's tagline, "You don't get to 500 million friends without making a few enemies," encapsulated its narrative of betrayal and ambition. Zuckerberg's response to inaccuracies. Zuckerberg has repeatedly criticized the social network for its inaccuracies. In a 2010 interview at Stanford University, he stated, "The movie made it seem like a lot of the motivation was about women or social status, which wasn't true. The reality is I was just sitting in my dorm room, coding, trying to make something cool." He acknowledged the film's entertainment value but disputed its portrayal of his intentions, particularly the suggestion that he stole Harvard connection outright. "The idea that I stole something is a misconception," he said. "Ideas evolve, and execution matters more than the initial spark." Zuckerberg also took issue with specific scenes, such as one where his character creates face mash after a breakup, implying personal vendettas drove his work. In reality, FaceMash predated the Facebook, and Zuckerberg's motivations were more technical than personal. He emphasized that Facebook's success came from his team's ability to scale and innovate, not from pilfering a single idea. The Winklevosses, too, felt the film misrepresented them. In a 2019 interview, Cameron Winklevoss told Boston Magazine, "The movie painted us as one-dimensional jocks, which wasn't fair. We had a vision for a social network, and we trusted Mark to help us build it." Tyler added, "The settlement wasn't just about money, it was about principle. We believed in our idea." In 2025, as Facebook, now Meta, marked its 20th anniversary, X posts revisited the Winklevoss-Zuckerberg saga, reflecting both nostalgia and ongoing fascination. A post by Ollie Coder on June 30, 2025, read, "Mark Zuckerberg stole Facebook from them. So they sued him for $65 million. Now they're crypto billionaires." 6 lessons from the wild story of the Winklevoss twins. Another, by @TL_branding on June 12, 2025, framed the twins' post-Facebook success as a $3 trillion revenge play, highlighting their cryptocurrency ventures with Gemini. These posts, while often hyperbolic, underscore the public's enduring interest in the dispute and the twins' transformation into crypto moguls. However, X posts also reveal polarized sentiment. Some users, like @Eisenhower, praised the twins' resilience. Most would have walked away. But the Winklevosses? They were just getting started. Others, like @CryptoJourneyers, leaned into the narrative of Zuckerberg's theft. Good old Zuckerberg stole their trillion-dollar idea. These posts reflect a mix of admiration for the twins' pivot to cryptocurrency and lingering resentment toward Zuckerberg, though they often oversimplify the legal nuances. Act 4, the personal and professional toll on Zuckerberg. Reputation and public scrutiny. The lawsuit and the social network cast a long shadow over Zuckerberg's reputation. In the early 2000s, he was hailed as a prodigy, but the allegations of betrayal painted him as an unethical opportunist. Media coverage, amplified by the film, questioned whether Facebook's success was built on stolen ideas. A 2011 Guardian article noted, "The Winklevoss's case raised an intriguing question: what would have happened if they had never met Zuckerberg?" It suggested that Harvard connection might have become a minor player like MySpace, but the perception of Zuckerberg as a thief persisted. Zuckerberg faced intense personal scrutiny. Friends and colleagues described him as deeply stressed during the lawsuit, aware that a public trial could derail Facebook's growth. In a 2010 New Yorker profile, he admitted to feeling haunted by the accusations, though he maintained his innocence. The settlement, while costly, allowed him to move forward without admitting guilt, preserving Facebook's momentum. The legal battle took a toll on Zuckerberg's personal life. At 23, he was navigating a multi-billion-dollar company while facing depositions and public criticism. Friends reported that he became more guarded, wary of whom to trust. The betrayal narrative, amplified by the social network, strained relationships with early collaborators like Eduardo Saverin, who also sued Zuckerberg and settled. The stress of litigation, combined with the pressure of running Facebook, pushed Zuckerberg into a more insular mindset, focusing on his inner circle and core team. Cautious approach to partnerships. The Harvard connection fiasco profoundly shaped Zuckerberg's approach to business. The absence of a non-disclosure agreement, NDA, with the Winklevosses was a critical oversight, as noted in a 2021 legal analysis. Had the Winklevoss twins had an NDA instead of a verbal agreement, a court might have found them rightful owners of Facebook. Zuckerberg learned from this mistake, implementing rigorous legal frameworks for future partnerships. Post-2008, Facebook's partnerships, with developers, advertisers, and later cryptocurrency exchanges, were marked by tight contracts and clear boundaries. In 2019, when Zuckerberg met with the Winklevoss twins to discuss Facebook's cryptocurrency plans, the interaction was formal and cautious, a far cry from the informal Harvard collaboration. A CNBC report noted that Zuckerberg sought the twins' expertise in crypto, acknowledging their success with Gemini, but the meeting was strictly professional, reflecting his wariness of unguarded alliances. Act 5, The Aftermath and Legacy. The Winklevoss twins' redemption. The Winklevoss twins emerged from the lawsuit not as defeated plaintiffs but as resilient entrepreneurs. They invested their settlement wisely, notably in Bitcoin, acquiring 1% of all Bitcoin in circulation by 2012, valued at $11 million at the time. By 2025, their crypto wealth, bolstered by their exchange Gemini, made each twin a billionaire, with estimates of $1.4 billion per brother. Their venture capital firm, Winklevoss Capital Management, and Gemini's success positioned them as leaders in the crypto revolution, a narrative celebrated in X posts like at Masculine Path 04s, now they're crypto billionaires. However, their post-Facebook journey wasn't without challenges. In 2023, Gemini faced a lawsuit from New York Attorney General Letitia James, alleging investor fraud, a reminder that their ventures carried risks. Still, the twins' pivot from Facebook's shadow to crypto pioneers reframed their story from one of loss to triumph. For Zuckerberg, the lawsuit was a crucible that hardened his resolve. By 2025, Meta was a $1 trillion company, with Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp dominating social media. Zuckerberg's wealth, estimated at over $200 billion, dwarfed the $65 million settlement, but the early betrayal shaped his leadership. He became known for his relentless focus on execution, a trait he credited to the Harvard Connection episode. In a 2020 Washington Post op-ed, he wrote, "Building something great means taking risks, but it also means learning from mistakes. We've always tried to do right by our users." The lawsuit also influenced Meta's pivot to the metaverse and cryptocurrency. Zuckerberg's 2019 meeting with the Winklevosses signaled a willingness to learn from rivals, but his cautious approach ensured Meta's crypto plans were tightly controlled. The failure of Meta's Libra/DM project in 2022 underscored the challenges of this shift, but Zuckerberg's resilience, forged in the Harvard Connection fire, kept him pushing forward. Debunking myths. The social network's dramatization exaggerated certain elements. The film suggested Zuckerberg's primary motivation was social status, a claim he refuted. The Winklevoss' portrayal as elitist jocks overlooked their entrepreneurial vision and technical contributions. The reality, as court documents show, was less cinematic, a dispute over ideas, execution, and trust, resolved not by a dramatic courtroom showdown but by a pragmatic settlement. Zuckerberg's emails, while damaging, didn't prove theft but rather a competitive edge. The twins' Harvard connection was a concept, not a finished product, and Zuckerberg's execution made Facebook what it became. Conclusion. The Winklevoss twins' lawsuit against Mark Zuckerberg was more than a legal battle. It was a defining moment that shaped the trajectories of both parties. For Zuckerberg, the betrayal narrative tested his resilience, tarnished his early reputation, and instilled a cautious approach to partnerships that defined Meta's growth. For the Winklevosses, the $65 million settlement was a springboard to new ventures, proving their ability to adapt and thrive. The saga, amplified by the social network and revisited in 2025 X posts, remains a cautionary tale about trust, ambition, and the fine line between inspiration and theft in the tech world. As we reflect on this story, it's clear that the Harvard Connection dispute was not about who owned the idea of a social network but about execution and opportunity. Zuckerberg's triumph lay in his ability to scale a vision, while the Winklevosses' legacy is their reinvention as crypto pioneers. Both sides, in their own way, turned betrayal into billions, leaving an indelible mark on the digital age.